My name is Arthur Penhaligon. Before I begin this account, I feel it is necessary to establish my credentials, not out of a sense of pride, but to lend credibility to the events I am about to describe. I am a man of logic, a graduate of a respectable university with a degree in library and information science. For a decade, I was content in my role as an archivist for a small historical society, a world of cataloged facts, verifiable sources, and the quiet, orderly passage of time. My life was one of predictable, comforting routine. That life is now a distant memory. The dissolution of my former life came about through a series of unfortunate, yet mundane, events. The historical society lost its funding, and my position was made redundant. For months, I sought similar employment, only to find the world had little need for a man with my particular, anachronistic skill set. My savings dwindled, and a quiet desperation began to set in. It was during a late-night, fruitless search on an online job board that I stumbled upon an unusual listing. Caretaker archivist needed for private, remote lodge in the Great Smoky Mountains. Generous compensation. Discretion and fortitude required. The posting was sparse on details, but the salary was, as advertised, remarkably generous, more than I had ever made. It seemed too good to be true. Yet, my circumstances were dire. I reasoned that a change of scenery, however drastic, might be beneficial. The archivist part of the title suggested a collection of books or historical documents, something that fell within my realm of expertise. I polished my resume, wrote a formal cover letter detailing my experience, and sent it off into the digital ether, expecting no reply. To my surprise, I received a response less than a day later. It was not an email, but a phone call from a man who introduced himself only as Mr. Elias Thorne, the lodge manager. His voice was gravelly, like stones rolling in a slow river, and he spoke with a measured, almost wary cadence. The interview was brief and unconventional. He asked me nothing about my archival skills. Instead, he posed a series of peculiar questions. "Mr. Penhaligon," he'd asked, "are you a man who is easily startled?" "I believe I have a steady disposition," I replied, slightly taken aback. "Are you prone to what some might call an overactive imagination?" "No, sir. I consider myself a pragmatist." "And finally," he said, after a long pause, "are you capable of following instructions to the letter, without question, even if those instructions seem illogical or arbitrary?" My financial situation compelled me to answer in the affirmative. I assured him I was. He seemed satisfied. He told me the job was mine if I wanted it, and gave me directions. The directions were not a simple address to be plugged into a GPS. They were a series of landmarks and turns on unmarked roads, culminating in a final instruction to wait at a specific dilapidated gas station just past the North Carolina border, where I would be met. 2 weeks later, having sold most of my possessions and placed the rest in storage, I found myself in a sputtering rental car, navigating the winding, mist-shrouded roads of the Smoky Mountains. The higher I climbed, the more the modern world seemed to fall away. Cell service vanished. The paved highway gave way to gravel, then to a dirt track barely wide enough for one vehicle. The forest pressed in on all sides, a dense tapestry of ancient trees, their leaves forming a canopy that blotted out much of the afternoon sun. It was beautiful, in a profound and intimidating way. I arrived at the designated gas station, a relic from a bygone era with rust, eaten pumps and cracked windows. As promised, a battered, dark green pickup truck was waiting. The man behind the wheel was Elias Thorne. He was older than his voice had suggested, with a deeply lined face, a thick gray beard, and eyes that seemed to hold a permanent sadness. He was not a large man, but he carried himself with an undeniable presence. "Arthur Penhaligon," he stated, not as a question, He gestured for me to leave my rental and get in his truck. "We'll take care of that," he said, nodding toward my car. "It won't be needed up at the lodge." The final leg of the journey was even more isolating. We drove for another hour on a road that was little more than a suggestion, fording a shallow creek and climbing ever higher into the mountains. We didn't speak. Elias seemed to be listening to the forest, his gaze constantly scanning the trees around us. I, in turn, felt a growing sense of insignificance, a small, fragile thing in this vast, untamed wilderness. Finally, we broke through a line of ancient hemlocks, and the lodge came into view. It was a magnificent, sprawling structure of dark timber and river stone, built to look as if it had grown organically from the mountainside. It had a steep, gabled roof and wide porches supported by massive log pillars. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, a welcoming plume against the darkening sky. It was called Blackwood Lodge, according to a discreetly carved wooden sign near the entrance. It was both grand and deeply unsettling. Elias led me inside. The interior was what one would expect: a grand hall with a soaring ceiling, a colossal stone fireplace, taxidermy heads of deer and bear staring down from the walls with glassy eyes, and heavy, rustic furniture. It was immaculately clean but felt unused. There were no guests, no other staff to be seen. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the whisper of the wind outside. "Your duties are simple," Elias said, leading me to a comfortable, looking room on the ground floor, which he indicated would be mine. "You will maintain the library, cataloging, cleaning, preservation. It's an extensive collection. You will also assist with guest check and in general upkeep as needed. The work itself is not demanding." He paused, his expression turning grave. "The difficulty of this job lies not in the work, but in the environment. There are rules, Mr. Penhaligon. They are not guidelines. They are not suggestions. They are absolute, and your survival here depends on your strict adherence to them." He handed me a small, leather-bound booklet. The cover was blank. Inside, written in elegant, old-fashioned cursive, was a list. "Read them. Memorize them," Elias commanded, his voice low and intense. "Never, ever break them." He left me then, closing the door softly behind him. I sat on the edge of the bed, the silence of the lodge pressing in on me. I opened the booklet. The first page was titled, "The Rules of Blackwood Lodge Part 1, General Conduct. Rule 1. All staff must be inside the main lodge building from sunset to sunrise. The grounds are strictly forbidden during the hours of darkness. Do not approach the windows to look outside, no matter what you may see or hear. The perimeter is secured. Rule 2D. The east wing of the lodge is permanently closed. The doors are locked for a reason. Do not attempt to enter. Do not linger in the hallway leading to it. If you hear sounds from that wing, you are to immediately return to your room or the main hall. Rule 3, we have very few guests. If a guest arrives, be polite but reserved. Do not engage in lengthy conversation. Do not ask personal questions. If a guest offers you a gift, you must politely but firmly decline. Rule 4A, at precisely 10:00 p.m. each night, you will hear 3 distinct knocks on the main entrance door. You are not to answer it. Under no circumstances will you open that door after 10:00 p.m. Even if it sounds like someone you know, even if they are begging for help, it is not for you. Rule 5A, if you hear a woman humming a lullaby in the corridors at night, do not leave your room. Lock your door and remain silent until the humming fades completely. She is not looking for you, and you do not want her to find you. Rule 60. The library is your primary domain. You will notice a single, large, leather-bound book on the central reading table, chained to the table itself. You are not to attempt to read this book. Your duties do not involve it. Simply dust it and ensure its chain is secure. Rule 70: food is provided for you in the kitchen. Eat heartedly. However, if you find a plate of food left for you that you did not prepare and no other staff member claims to have made, do not eat it. Leave it untouched. It will be gone by morning. I read the list twice, then a third time. A cold knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. This was not some quirky set of house rules. It was a litany of madness. My first instinct was to dismiss it as an elaborate hazing ritual for the new employee, a way to test my mettle. I was a man of reason. I did not believe in ghosts or monsters that lurked in the dark. I believed in facts and evidence. That night, I tried to rationalize it all away as I prepared for bed. The lodge was old, full of drafts and strange noises. The rules were simply a way of managing the anxieties of living in such an isolated place. I locked my door, more out of habit than fear. I laid in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the old building groaning around me. Sleep was slow to come. I don't know what time it was when I was jolted awake. It was the sound that did it. 3 slow, powerful knocks that echoed through the silent lodge. Thump, thump, thump. They came from the direction of the main entrance. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Rule 4. At precisely 10:00 p.m. each night, I glanced at the small clock on my bedside table. It was exactly 10:00 p.m. A part of my mind, the logical, rational part, screamed that it was Elias testing me. But the sound, it hadn't sounded like a human fist. It was heavier, denser. A profound silence followed. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else. There was nothing but the wind. I lay there for what felt like an hour, every nerve ending alight, before exhaustion finally dragged me back into a troubled sleep. The next day, I began my work in the library. It was a magnificent 2-story room filled with thousands of books. It was an archivist's dream. Yet, my mind was not on the books. It was on the rules. As I worked, I found the chained book on the central table. It was massive, bound in what looked like black, hairless leather, with no title or markings. The chain was thick, old iron, bolted directly to the heavy oak table. I ran my hand over the cover, a strange coldness seeping into my fingertips. I resisted the powerful urge to examine the clasp that held it shut. That evening, as the sun began to dip below the mountain peaks, casting long, distorted shadows across the grounds, Elias found me in the main hall. "The sun is setting, Mr. Penhaligon," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Time to come inside for good. Remember the rules." His eyes met mine, and in their depths, I saw no hint of a prank. I saw only a profound, soul-deep wariness, and a flicker of something that looked like fear. At that moment, my skepticism began to crumble, replaced by a chilling realization. Whatever was happening at Blackwood Lodge, it was real, and I was now a part of it. The first week at Blackwood Lodge settled into a strange and unsettling rhythm. My days were spent in the magnificent solitude of the library. As an archivist, I should have been in paradise. The collection was eclectic and priceless, containing first editions I had only ever read about and leather-bound manuscripts that smelled of dust and forgotten centuries. I meticulously began the task of cataloging, my hands moving with practiced efficiency, but my mind was a turbulent sea of anxiety. The rules were a constant, humming presence in the back of my thoughts. A discordant melody played against the quiet symphony of my work. Each morning, I would find Elias in the kitchen, nursing a mug of black coffee, his gaze fixed on the dense wall of trees visible through the window. He was a man of few words, but his presence was a strange comfort. He was the only other living soul in this vast, silent place, the only other person bound by the same incomprehensible laws. Our conversations were brief and functional, always skirting the edges of the questions that burned within me. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," I would say. "Penhaligon," he would grunt in acknowledgement. "Sleep well." The question was never casual. His eyes would search mine for any sign of disturbance, any hint that the night had brought more than just the customary, dreadful knocking at 10:00 p.m. In my first few days, I had tried to probe. "The knocking last night," I began once, my voice carefully neutral. "It's a rather forceful sound. Is it a structural issue?" The wood settling. Elias took a slow sip of his coffee. "The rules do not invite interpretation, Mr. Penhaligon. They require only obedience. The why of it is not your concern. Your concern is the what, and what you must do is nothing." His tone was not unkind, but it was absolute, a stone wall against which my logic could only shatter. I learned quickly not to ask. The rules began to manifest in subtle, chilling ways. On my third evening, I worked later than usual in the library, engrossed in a fascinating collection of 17th century botanical illustrations. When I finally returned to the kitchen for a late supper, I found a plate on the small staff table. On it sat a perfectly cooked piece of salmon, a mound of wild rice, and steamed asparagus. It looked delicious, and for a moment, my stomach rumbled in appreciation. Then, a cold dread washed over me. I had not prepared it. I found Elias in the main hall stoking the fire. "Mr. Thorne," I asked, "did you happen to make an extra plate of dinner?" He turned from the fireplace, his face unreadable in the flickering light. "No, Arthur. I ate hours ago." He looked at me pointedly. "Rule 7. I returned to the kitchen and stared at the plate. It seemed impossible that it had simply appeared. My rational mind scrambled for an explanation. Had Elias forgotten? Was he testing me again? But his denial had been unequivocal. I remembered his warning, "Leave it untouched. It will be gone by morning." With a sense of profound unease, I prepared a simple sandwich for myself and ate it on the other side of the room, my back to the mysterious offering. I did not sleep well that night. When I entered the kitchen the next morning, the plate and all the food upon it was gone. There was no sign it had ever been there. The true test of my resolve, however, came at the end of my first week. It was a Tuesday. A thick, oppressive fog had descended upon the mountains, shrouding the lodge in a blanket of silent, gray mist. The trees dripped with moisture, and the world outside the windows seemed to have dissolved entirely. The silence within the lodge was deeper than usual, muffled by the fog. I spent the day feeling watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck that I could not shake. That night, after the 10:00 p.m., knocking had come and gone, I lay in my bed reading by the light of a small lamp. The lodge was deathly quiet, and then I heard it. It started so faintly I thought I was imagining it. A soft, melodic humming. It was a woman's voice weaving a simple, nameless tune. A lullaby, Rule 5. If you hear a woman humming a lullaby in the corridors at night, do not leave your room. Lock your door and remain silent until the humming fades completely. My blood ran cold. I set my book down, my hand trembling slightly. The humming grew louder, closer. It seemed to be drifting down the main corridor, heading toward my room. It was a beautiful sound, pure and clear, yet it was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. It spoke of a profound and ancient sorrow. I rose from my bed and crept to the door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I checked the lock. It was already engaged, a small comfort. The humming was just outside my door now. It stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, thick with anticipation. I stood frozen, every muscle tensed. I imagined a woman standing just on the other side of the wooden door, her head cocked, listening. She is not looking for you, and you do not want her to find you. The words from the rule book screamed in my mind. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. After an eternity that was likely no more than a minute, the humming began again, this time moving away, growing fainter and fainter, until it was swallowed once more by the oppressive silence of the lodge. I did not get back into bed. I spent the rest of the night in a chair, facing the door, until the first gray light of dawn broke through the fog. The next afternoon, our first guest arrived. I was in the main hall, dusting the grim, glassy eyes of a mounted stag, when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel drive, a sound I hadn't realized I'd missed. Elias appeared from his office, his face set in a grim, professional mask. "Stay here, Mr. Penhaligon. Remember Rule 3. A man entered the lodge, shaking the damp from a long, black coat. He was tall and impossibly handsome, with pale skin, dark hair, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He smiled, a brilliant, charming flash of white in the dim hall. "Elias, my good man," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "It's been too long, Monsieur." "Sterling," Elias replied, his voice devoid of any warmth. "We've prepared your usual room." The man, Mr. Sterling, let his gaze wander around the hall, and it settled on me. "And who is this, new blood?" He glided over to me, his movements unnervingly fluid. He extended a pale, slender hand. "Silas Sterling. A pleasure." I took his hand. It was as cold as marble. "Arthur Penhaligon," I managed. "Arthur," he repeated, tasting the name. A fine, strong name. The name of a king. He held my gaze, and I felt a strange, compelling pull, a desire to tell him everything, to ask him about this place. I fought it down, remembering the rule. Be polite but reserved. Do not engage in lengthy conversation. "Welcome to Blackwood Lodge." "Sir," I said formally, withdrawing my hand. Sterling's smile didn't falter, but his eyes seemed to harden for a fraction of a second. "I've brought a small token of my appreciation for your hospitality," he said, reaching into his coat. He produced a beautiful silver pocket watch, intricately engraved with celestial patterns, for the new caretaker, a welcome gift. If a guest offers you a gift, you must politely but firmly decline. The watch was exquisite. The archivist in me, the lover of old and beautiful things, wanted to take it to study its craftsmanship. But the cold dread that had become my constant companion at the lodge coiled in my gut. "That is incredibly generous of you, sir," I said, my voice stiffer than I intended. "But I cannot accept. It is against the lodge's policy." Sterling's smile finally vanished. A flicker of something cold and ancient passed through his eyes. It was an expression of deep, predatory hunger. It was there, and then gone in an instant, replaced by a look of mild disappointment. "As you wish," he said smoothly. He turned his attention back to Elias, who had been watching our exchange with hawk-like intensity. "Show me to my room, Elias. The journey has been tiring." As they ascended the grand staircase, I felt a wave of relief so powerful it left me dizzy. I had passed the test. But as I watched Sterling's retreating back, I noticed something that made my breath catch in my throat. For a split second, as he passed a window, his reflection did not appear in the glass. I blinked, telling myself it was a trick of the light, the strange, foggy twilight. But I knew what I had seen, or rather, what I had not seen. Later that evening, as I made my way towards the library, I had to pass the corridor leading to the east wing. A heavy oak door, bound with iron straps, stood at the end of the hall. It was, as Rule 2 stated, permanently closed. But as I drew near, I heard a sound from behind it. It was a faint, rhythmic scratching. Scrape, 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 like claws dragging against old wood. Do not linger in the hallway leading to it. If you hear sounds from that wing, you are to immediately return to your room or the main hall. My feet felt rooted to the floor. The archivist in me, The man who craved knowledge and answers wanted to press his ear to the door. What was in there? What was so terrible that it had to be locked away? The scratching stopped, replaced by a soft, wet, tearing sound. It was a sound I could not place, but it was viscerally, horribly wrong. A floorboard creaked on the staircase above. I looked up to see Mr. Sterling looking down at me, a knowing, predatory smile on his face. He put a single, pale finger to his lips in a gesture of shared secrecy. That was what broke the spell. I turned and walked, as quickly as I could without running, back to the relative safety of the main hall, the sound of my own heart drowning out the horrors in the East Wing. My sanctuary, the library, suddenly felt miles away. The rules were not just a list of prohibitions, they were a shield, and I was beginning to understand that the things they were protecting me from were already inside the house. The presence of Silas Sterling changed the very atmosphere of Blackwood Lodge. It was as if a high-pressure system had settled over the mountains, making the air thick and heavy, charged with an unspoken energy. My carefully constructed routine of work and avoidance was shattered. He was a specter of charm and menace, gliding through the halls with a silent, proprietary grace that was deeply unnerving. He would appear without a sound, a tall, dark figure standing in a doorway I was certain had been empty a moment before, a faint, knowing smile on his handsome face. My sanctuary, the library, no longer felt safe. He would often join me there, not to read, but to watch. He would settle into one of the large leather armchairs, his cold eyes following my every move as I sorted through manuscripts or updated my cataloging system. The silence he brought with him was different from the lodge's usual quiet. It was a predatory stillness, the silence of a cat watching a cornered mouse. "You have a passion for the past, don't you, Arthur?" he remarked one afternoon, his voice a silken intrusion into the quiet room. I paused, my hand hovering over a stack of brittle, yellowed letters. "I believe it's important to preserve it," I answered, keeping my tone formal. His smile widened. "Oh, it is. But some things refuse to be preserved. They refuse to stay in the past." He gestured vaguely toward the shelves. "This lodge, for instance, it is a living history. It remembers everything, and everyone." His words hung in the air, freighted with meaning I could only guess at. He seemed to be constantly baiting me, tempting me to break Rule 3 and engage, to ask the questions that clawed at the inside of my skull. Who was he? What was his relationship to this place? What did he know about the scratching behind the East Wing door, or the humming woman? But I held my tongue, the memory of Elias's grim warnings and the cold hunger in Sterling's eyes serving as a powerful deterrent. My fear, however, was now warring with my most fundamental instinct as an archivist, the drive to uncover, to understand, to bring order to chaos. The rules were a cage, and while I knew it was a cage that protected me, I began to rattle its bars. I started a new, secret project. While my official task was to catalog the main collection, my private mission was to find any record, any document that could explain the reality of Blackwood Lodge. I searched for architectural plans, old ledgers, previous staff records, anything. For days, my search yielded nothing. It was as if the lodge's operational history had been deliberately expunged. Then, I found it, tucked away in a dusty, overlooked corner of the attic storage, which connected to the library via a narrow spiral staircase, was a small, unassuming wooden crate. It was not on any of my initial inventories. Inside, beneath a pile of moth-eaten blankets, was a collection of journals. They were simple, cloth-bound notebooks, their pages filled with the spidery, increasingly frantic handwriting of my predecessor. His name was Thomas Granger. I took one of the journals back to my room, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. I waited until after the 10:00 p.m. knocking, the sound of which now felt like a grim nightly appointment, before I dared to open it. October 12th, the first entry read, "Elias is a good man, but he doesn't say enough. He gives you the rules, but he doesn't give you the reasons. He thinks it protects you. I think ignorance is a different kind of danger." I read on, my blood turning to ice. Thomas wrote of the same phenomena I was experiencing: the nightly knocking, the uneaten food, the humming lullaby. But his accounts were raw, stripped of the professional detachment I tried to maintain. His fear was a living thing on the page. He gave the humming woman a name: Eleanor, the weeping bride. He claimed she had hanged herself in one of the guest rooms a century ago, after her groom vanished on their wedding night, and now she wandered the halls, forever searching. But it was his writing about the guests and the East Wing that truly terrified me. November 3rd. A guest arrived today. A Mr. S. He has the eyes of a wolf. He looks at you like you're a meal he's decided to save for later. Elias told me to be careful, that some guests are older than the trees and carry a hunger that can't ever be filled. S. offered me a silver locket. I remembered the rule and refused. The look he gave me: "I will not sleep tonight." November 10th. The scratching from the East Wing is worse. It's a frenzy now. S. stands in the hall and listens to it. He smiles. I asked Elias what was in there. He grew angry, a rare thing for him. He told me some doors are meant to keep things in, and some are meant to keep things out. The East Wing door, he said, does both. The most chilling entries, however, were about the chained book in the library. Thomas never called it a book. He called it the Ledger of Deads. December 1st. I touched the ledger today. Just the cover. The cold of it, it's not natural. It felt like touching a tombstone. I can feel a weight in the library now. A presence. It's aware. It knows I'm here. It knows I'm reading its secrets. December 15th. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. S. asked me for a favor. He wanted me to get the key to the East Wing from Elias's office. He promised me answers. He promised me a way out of here. I was so scared. I said no. He wasn't angry. He just smiled and said my debt was now recorded. I don't know what it means. I keep thinking about the ledger. Did it hear me? Did it write my name down? The final entry was a single, scrawled sentence, barely legible. The door is open. He let it out. God help me, he let it out. I closed the journal, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I now understood that my refusal of Sterling's pocket watch was not just a test of obedience. It was a transaction I had narrowly avoided. A debt I had refused to incur. The next morning, Elias must have seen the change in me. The terror must have been plain on my face. He found me in the kitchen, staring into a cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. "You've been looking for things you shouldn't," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't deny it. I simply nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I had hoped your pragmatism would be stronger than your curiosity." I see I was mistaken. He reached into the inner pocket of his worn jacket and produced another small, leather-bound booklet, identical to the first. He placed it on the table in front of me. Perhaps it is time for the next chapter. I opened it. The page was titled, Part 2, on the nature of our guests. Rule 8, our guests are not all of the same kind. Some are merely passing through. Others are bound to this place. Do not assume they are subject to the same laws of nature as you. Time and physical space are, for some, conversational suggestions rather than immutable facts. Rule 9A. If a guest asks you for a favor, you must consider it a contract. Analyze the terms. A request for a book from the library is a simple favor. A request for a key to a locked room is a complex one. The price of refusal is always a known quantity. The price of acceptance is unknowable and often eternal. Choose wisely. Rule Hyundai. Do not attempt to bargain with any guest who offers you knowledge. The secrets of this house are not commodities, they are traps. The only price they accept for their answers is your servitude. Rule Levity. If you see a guest speaking to someone who is not there, do not interrupt. You are witnessing a conversation across a threshold you are not meant to cross. To acknowledge the unseen party is to invite them to speak to you next. I looked up from the booklet, my mind reeling. This was no longer about survival. This was about navigating a complex, supernatural ecosystem with its own politics, its own predators, and its own prey. The confirmation came that very night. I was in the library, trying to lose myself in my work, when Sterling appeared. He didn't glide in this time. He strode in with purpose, his eyes burning with an intensity that pinned me in place. "Arthur," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I find myself in need of a partner for a small venture." I stood up, putting the heavy oak desk between us. "Sir, there is an artifact in the East Wing," he said, his gaze fixed on mine. "An item of great personal value to me. Elias, in his infinite caution, keeps the wing sealed. The key, however, is in his office. A simple thing for a man like you, who moves about the lodge so freely, to acquire it for me." My heart hammered against my ribs. It was happening. Just as it had happened to Thomas Granger. A request for a key to a locked room is a complex one. "Think of it, Arthur," Sterling purred, moving around the desk, closing the distance between us. "You seek answers. I have them all. I can tell you what the knocking truly is. I can tell you why Eleanor weeps. I can tell you what is chained to that table. All I ask for is this one simple favor." He was inches from me now. His charm was a physical force, pressing in on me, clouding my thoughts. The promise of knowledge was intoxicating, a siren song to the archivist in my soul. But then I saw Thomas's last, frantic scrawl in my mind's eye. He let it out. I saw the cold, predatory hunger in Sterling's eyes, the same look he'd given me when I'd refused his watch. The price of refusal is always a known quantity. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it was firm. "I cannot help you, Miss Sterling." The change was instantaneous and absolute. The handsome, charming facade dissolved like smoke, and for a terrifying second, I saw the thing that wore his face. His eyes blazed with a cold, black fire, and his features seemed to twist, to elongate, his mouth pulling back from his teeth in a silent, predatory snarl. An aura of pure malevolence rolled off him, a palpable wave of ancient hatred that made the air crackle and the temperature in the room plummet. "A debt has been recorded," he hissed, his voice no longer smooth velvet, but the grating sound of stone on stone. "The debt is mine." A new voice boomed from the doorway. We both turned. Elias stood there, and he was no longer the wary, quiet old man I knew. He held a gnarled, iron-tipped staff, and his eyes, though still sad, now held a fire of their own, a look of grim, unyielding authority. He seemed larger, more substantial, as if he were drawing power from the very foundations of the lodge. "Your stay is over, Silas," Elias said, his voice ringing with power. "The sun will be down in an hour. You will be gone before then." Sterling stared at Elias, the monstrous rage in his face slowly being reined in, masked once more by the handsome features. He looked from Elias to me, and he smiled, a slow, chilling expression that promised future horrors. "Another time, then," he said. He gave a slight, mocking bow, and then turned and walked out of the library, his footsteps for the first time making a distinct sound on the old wooden floor. I was left shaking, leaning on the desk for support. Elias walked over to me, the power receding from him, leaving him looking old and tired once more. "You did well," "Arthur," he said quietly, "you are stronger than Thomas was." He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "But you must understand, you have not defeated him. You have merely postponed his claim. You have made an enemy of something that does not forget, and its name is now written next to yours in the ledger." Silas Sterling's departure did not bring the relief I had expected. Instead, a new and more profound silence descended upon Blackwood Lodge, a heavy, listening quiet that felt far more menacing than his predatory presence. The confrontation had stripped away the last vestiges of my denial. I was no longer a skeptical archivist, caught in a strange situation. I was a participant, a piece on a board I was only just beginning to comprehend. And my name was in the ledger. That final, chilling statement from Elias echoed in my mind, a sentence of doom from which there was no appeal. "Its name is now written next to yours in the ledger." I found myself staring at the massive, chained book on the library table with a new kind of terror. It was no longer just a forbidden object. It was a gravestone with my name on it, and I was still walking around. I felt its presence as a cold spot in the room, a weight that pulled at the light and air. I imagined unseen script flowing across its pages, my own name, Arthur Penhaligon, entwined with the ancient evil of Silas Sterling. Elias watched me closely in the days that followed. He seemed to understand the shift that had occurred within me. The pragmatist had died, and in his place was a man consumed by a very rational fear. One evening, as I stood staring at the ledger, unable to work, unable to think of anything else, he joined me in the library. He did not speak, but simply placed his gnarled hand on the book's cold, leathery cover. "It is not a book, Arthur," he said softly, his voice filled with an ancient wariness. "Not in the way you understand books. It is the heart of this place. It is the anchor, the core of the bargain that allows this lodge to exist." "A bargain?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "This mountain is old," he continued, his gaze distant. "And there are things that have slept within it for aeons. Things that should not be woken. The lodge was built to keep the balance. It is a sanctuary and a prison. It offers shelter to those who can abide by its rules, and it contains those who would otherwise ravage the world outside." He looked at me, his sad eyes holding a new intensity. "Sterling is one of the latter. He is bound by the rules as long as he is a guest here. He cannot take what is not freely given. By refusing his favor, you denied him a foothold, a claim on you that would have allowed him to bypass the ancient laws of this place. You forced his hand. But the debt—" I stammered. "He said a debt was recorded, and I took it upon myself," Elias said grimly. "An old account between us was settled, but the ledger, it is impartial. It is a record of all transactions, all promises, all conflicts. Your defiance of Sterling was a significant event. It has been noted. You are no longer just the caretaker, Arthur. You are part of the history of this place now. The house knows you, and its other residents will take an interest." His words were prophetic. The very next night, the scratching from the east wing returned. But it was different. It was no longer the sound of claws on wood. It was a wet, tearing sound, followed by a low, guttural chattering. It was the sound of something eating. And then, a voice, thin and reedy, drifted from under the door. "Is the wolf man gone?" it whispered. "Did he leave anything for me?" I froze in the hallway, my blood turning to slush in my veins. "The door is open," he let it out. Thomas Granger's frantic last words. Sterling hadn't just been trying to get an artifact out of the East Wing. He had been trying to get the key to let something else out. And my predecessor, in a moment of weakness, had done it for him. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the dark space beneath the iron-bound door. I fled to the main hall, where Elias was waiting, his face grim, the iron-tipped staff in his hand. "It is awake," he said simply. Sterling's presence agitated it. "Your conflict with him has made it bold. What is it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It is what remains of the man who built this lodge," Elias said, his voice low. "A man who delved too deep into the mountain's secrets and made a bargain he could not afford. He sought immortality and found only an endless, gnawing hunger. The East Wing was his, and now it is his prison. It cannot leave that wing so long as the seals hold, but its influence can." That night, for the first time, the 10:00 p.m. knocking was different. After the 3 heavy, resonant thumps on the main door, there was a 4th, lighter knock. A frantic, scratching rap that came from my own bedroom door. I huddled in my bed, listening to the soft, insistent scratching and a low, wet whispering of my name. "Arthur, let me in. I have secrets for you. Arthur." The next morning, I found the final booklet of rules placed beside my coffee cup in the kitchen. Part 3, on the nature of the lodge itself. Rule 20: you may hear your name whispered from dark corners or empty rooms. Do not answer. It is the house testing its boundaries. To answer is to give it permission to cross them. Rule 13: the entity in the East Wing will try to bargain. It will offer you secrets, knowledge of the other residents, even the key to the ledger. It lies. Its only currency is hunger, and its only goal is to be released. All of its promises are poison. Rule 14: the ledger of debts cannot be opened by force. It only opens to settle an account. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to make a bargain with the house or any resident that would require the ledger to be opened. Some debts can only be paid with the soul of the debtor. Rule 15: Elias Thorne is the guardian of this lodge. His word supersedes all other rules. If he gives you a direct command, you must obey it without question, for it means the balance has been broken, and only a desperate act can restore it. The rules were no longer a list of strange prohibitions. They were a catechism for a war I hadn't known I was fighting. The lodge was not a passive entity. It was a conscious, thinking being, and I was living in its mind. The final confrontation came sooner than I could have imagined. It was a stormy night. Rain lashed against the windows, and wind howled through the eaves, sounding like the wails of 1,000 lost souls. The power flickered and died, plunging the lodge into a terrifying, profound darkness, lit only by the frantic flashes of lightning outside and the embers in the main hall's fireplace. The 10:00 p.m. knocking came and went. But then the humming of Eleanor, the weeping bride, began. It was different this time, not sorrowful, but panicked. It was a high, keening wail that echoed through the halls. And it was followed by a wet, dragging sound and low, eager chuckling. "Eleanor!" Elias shouted, his voice booming through the darkness. He grabbed his staff and a heavy iron lantern, its candle casting huge, dancing shadows. "Arthur, with me! Now!" Rule 15. His word supersedes all other rules. I followed him without hesitation. We found her, or what was left of her, at the top of the grand staircase. The spectral, shimmering form of the weeping bride was cornered, flickering like a dying flame. Before her was a thing of shadow and nightmare. It had no definite shape, a roiling mass of darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. It had too many joints, too many limbs, and it moved with a horrifying, scuttling gait. The creature from the East Wing, the remnant. It has broken the seal. Elias roared, raising his staff, which began to glow with a soft, silver light. Sterling's conflict weakened the wards. The remnant ignored us. Its attention was fixed on the terrified spirit of Eleanor. It lunged, its shadowy form enveloping her. Her humming became a shriek of pure terror, and then was abruptly silenced. The remnant seemed to swell, to darken, and a low sigh of satisfaction echoed in the hall. It had consumed her. Then, it turned its attention to us. It had no face, but I could feel its ancient, ravenous gaze fix upon me. The new one? It whispered, its voice a chorus of dry rustling leaves and wet, tearing flesh. You have a debt, the wolfman's debt. I can smell it on you. Pay me. Pay me and I will leave this house to you. Back to your prison, abomination, Elias yelled, stepping in front of me. He slammed the butt of his staff on the floor, and a wave of silver light washed over the creature, causing it to recoil with a hiss of pain. But it was too strong. It had fed. It surged forward, knocking Elias and his staff aside. The guardian crumpled to the floor, the light from his staff extinguished. The creature loomed over me, a wave of cold and decay washing over me. The ledger. Elias gasped from the floor, his voice weak. It wants to make a bargain for your debt. Don't let it! There is only one way to seal it again. An offering. A memory. It must be given freely! The remnant was upon me, its shadowy tendrils reaching, the smell of damp earth and rot filling my lungs. My mind raced. An offering. A memory. Something given freely. My eyes darted to the library, to the chained book. The ledger. It was the heart of the house. A record. A memory. I had a choice. I could make a bargain with this creature, using the debt Sterling had placed upon me as my currency, and hope to survive. Or I could follow the Guardian's desperate command. I made my choice. I turned my back on the monster and sprinted into the library, the creature's hungry hissing right behind me. I did not run for the door, for my room, for safety. I ran straight for the central table, for the massive, chained book that held my name. I placed both my hands on its impossibly cold cover. I have an offering! I screamed into the oppressive darkness of the library. A memory! The memory of Thomas Granger! The memory of his fear, his mistake! I give it freely to the house! Take it and seal the door! For a moment, nothing happened. The creature paused in the doorway, hesitating. Then, the ledger beneath my hands began to vibrate. A low, resonant hum filled the room, and the iron chain that bound it to the table glowed with a faint, red light. The book was responding. It was accepting my offering. And as the humming grew into a soul-shaking drone, I felt a cold, final certainty. I had just made my first transaction with the house itself, and the price was yet to be determined.